Let me tell you about my sister Jessica, and I'm going to use her real name because, honestly, why shouldn't I? What she did was nothing short of shocking. She stole my fiancé, and now she's amazed that I ended up marrying someone better. The whole story still feels like a bitter pill to swallow, even after all these years. You see, Jessica deliberately charmed my fiancé away from me, believing that someone as handsome and wealthy as him was too good for an ordinary person like me. She always insisted that he deserved someone as stunningly beautiful as herself. And so she made her move, setting her trap, and he fell right into it, eventually marrying her. Looking back now, it was actually a blessing in disguise, because it revealed his true colors, his unfaithfulness. And somehow, through all that pain, I found someone far better. But let me take you back 15 years, to when I was 26. I'm 41 now. Jessica is 6 years younger than me, and we're as different as day and night, always have been. She was always the center of attention at family gatherings and social events, like a magnet drawing everyone's eyes. There's no denying her beauty. She was and still is strikingly beautiful, turning heads wherever she goes. She carries that remarkable appearance like a crown, wearing it with unmistakable pride. Jessica never missed an opportunity to flaunt herself while looking down on those who didn't meet her beauty standards, and yes, that included me. She constantly criticized my clothes and mocked my introverted nature, her words cutting deeper than she probably realized. As children, while I was lost in books and comics, Jessica was likely playing dress-up and experimenting with makeup. I didn't even own a Barbie doll, can you imagine? Jessica and I never had that special bond that sisters are supposed to share. She saw herself as this fashion icon while viewing me as the unchangeable, plain sister. In a way, she wasn't entirely wrong about that last part. I've always preferred simplicity, avoiding dramatic scenes or attention. I find peace in quietness, cherishing my own tranquil space. Moving away for high school was such a relief. I felt like I could finally breathe. I couldn't bear being around such a spoiled child anymore. Medical school kept me wonderfully busy, giving me purpose and direction. During holidays and spring breaks, I'd make brief visits home, keeping them as short as possible. My relationship with Jessica became more manageable simply because we saw less of each other. She dropped out of high school to pursue fashion, then left fashion school to chase a modeling career. During the 5 years I kept in touch with her, she only managed to book 2 photo shoots for local clothing brands. It's debatable whether you could call that the successful modeling career she claimed to have. After I moved out, the bitterness between Jessica and me somewhat subsided. Meeting only twice a year for a few days meant fewer opportunities for her to provoke me, so our relationship seemed better on the surface. Then, during my first year of college, I met Samuel. He was significantly older than me, already in his master's program while I was just a freshman. He had several years of practical experience as a resident physician, specializing in cardiology, one of the most prestigious fields in medicine. And on top of all that, he was strikingly handsome. He taught cardiovascular system courses to first-year students, earning money while refreshing his knowledge. His straightforward teaching style made him incredibly popular, especially among female students. After all, who wouldn't want to take classes from a tall, blue-eyed graduate student? He stood at 6 feet 2 inches, with a slim, well-proportioned physique that turned heads. I ended up taking his class, and gradually, we began dating. In my final year of college, after 4 years together, he proposed. There was no reason to refuse. I was already working at a hospital by then. During a holiday break back home, my mother noticed the ring and started asking questions. In that festive, happy moment, I shared everything with her. She literally jumped with joy, as it was rare for me to be serious about anyone. Samuel was my first boyfriend, my first intimate relationship. My mother pressed for more details about Samuel, clearly sensing wedding bells in the air. Jessica had always insisted that I could never land as a good man, by which she meant wealthy and handsome. She would say that whenever I started dating someone, they'd run away within a week. When Jessica met Samuel, her eyes lit up with an intensity I'd never seen before, and she became oddly interested in learning everything about him. It was strange to see her show such interest in my supposedly boring life. When I asked why she was so curious, she claimed she needed to know everything about our future family member. Mother asked me to invite him for Christmas Eve dinner. I later discovered that Jessica had actually prompted Mom to make this invitation. Samuel's schedule was free that year, so he agreed to accompany me. When we arrived, Jessica was there to greet us. This was surprising because Jessica was usually a party girl who never stayed home on weekends, and she was supposed to be at a week-long party with friends for the end of year. But there she was, which was odd, though I tried not to think too much about it. I've never been one to pry into others' lives. When Samuel and I entered, my sister was visibly impressed by him. Her first comment was about how she'd heard he was wealthy, but hadn't realized he was so handsome too. Her flirtatious gestures were obvious, happening right in front of me. Yet I didn't worry, I was confident in our relationship. Throughout the evening, she kept finding ways to get close to him, praising him for trivial things, unnecessarily touching his arm or thigh, and forcing conversation. At dinner, she sat next to him, and when I stared at her, she pursed her lips and said she should get her turn to sit with him that night since I could sit with him every day. Everyone laughed, treating it as a light joke. When she learned during conversation that Samuel planned to take a walk after dinner, she immediately offered to show him around the neighborhood. Samuel looked at me, but I was too stunned to say anything, my face frozen in seriousness. He awkwardly agreed, and they went for their walk together. On our way home from my parents' house that night, Samuel asked if I had noticed Jessica being flirtatious with him. I laughed it off, dismissing it as her usual attention-seeking behavior. I thought Samuel was too intelligent to be swayed by such superficial beauty. But he fell for Jessica's charms and betrayed me at the first opportunity. A few months later, I had my final exams and, as usual, I limited my social life to focus on studying. I began to notice that his communication was becoming less frequent. When I asked why, he claimed he wanted me to concentrate on my finals. I was too busy to suspect any infidelity. On the last day of exams, I asked him to pick me up from university, but he said he was busy. Late that night, I called to check on him, and he said he was homesick. I went to surprise him at his place, but found the door locked. I called again, but there was no answer. I waited for his call the next day, but it never came. I had the audacity to call again and asked why he had lied the night before. He casually mentioned he'd forgotten to tell me he'd stayed at a colleague's house. Foolishly, I didn't see this as the red flag it was. This pattern continued for a week until I finally lost patience and faced reality. When I directly asked if he wanted to break up, he hesitated for a few seconds before mumbling yes. He said he didn't love me anymore. That was our last conversation. I didn't ask the when, why, or how. Heartbreak always hurts, but it's especially painful when there's no explanation. Anxiety, self-doubt, and countless unasked and unanswered questions lingered in my mind. It took several months and bottles of malt whiskey to get over it, but I eventually did. I'm grateful he waited until after finals to end things, otherwise, I might have needed another year to finish medical school. 7 months later, Jessica called to invite me to her engagement party. I congratulated her and asked about her fiancé, but she wouldn't reveal his name, saying I'd meet him at the party. I was happy for her, though there was a twinge of sadness knowing I should have been the one getting married. I was single, still recovering from my heartbreak. Trying to forget my miserable life, I attended my sister's engagement party. As soon as I entered the venue, I saw the banner, Jessica and Samuel. My spine turned to ice, but I tried to calm myself, thinking Samuel was a common name. Then I saw two of Samuel's friends, who turned their backs when I approached. My heart started pounding like a drum. As I got closer to the podium where Jessica sat with her fiancé, I froze at the sight of Samuel with his arm around her. I stood there, tears welling up, not knowing what to do. The next thing I remember is my mother pulling me aside, begging me to stay calm. She asked me not to make a scene and to let everyone be happy. She said no one knew about our past and she wanted to keep it that way. I screamed at her, accusing her of knowing everything and allowing it, calling Jessica a witch and saying they were all complicit. That's when Jessica approached with a malicious smile. Though it was 15 years ago, I remember every word she said with crystal clarity. It was the most humiliating moment of my life. She looked at me with contempt and said that how could an ordinary person like me ever think I could keep someone as handsome, tall, and wealthy as Samuel. She said it was impossible for someone like me, that I should stick to dating ordinary people like myself. She told me to look at how perfect they looked together, how everyone was admiring them. What a lovely couple they made, she sneered, and added that people would have laughed if they'd seen me next to him. She was truly cruel. I wanted to slap her, but my mother held me back and told me to leave. My mother, thinking I'd come to stop the engagement, screamed at me, asking why I'd come and if I had no self-respect. I responded that I hadn't known this witch was marrying him, and if I had, I would never have shown my face. Jessica denied inviting me and lied to my mother, claiming that she had asked her not to invite me to avoid hurting me, when in reality, Jessica had deliberately invited me to humiliate me. I left the place sobbing uncontrollably. The pain of heartbreak came rushing back with crushing force. To say it was painful would be an understatement. It was the most traumatic period of my life, my absolute rock bottom. Fortunately, I graduated with good grades and secured a position at a busy hospital. I kept myself so busy I had no time to think, deliberately filling even my holidays with work to move forward. Years later, I met my husband at work. He's a board member of the hospital chain where I work. We dated for 4 years before marrying, and now we're proud parents of 2 children. Last week, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Jessica. It took me a few seconds to realize it was my sister Jessica, as I also have a patient by that name. When I asked why she was calling, she was unnaturally kind, asking about my life. The Jessica I knew never gave me her time without a reason. I told her to get to the point, and after a moment's silence, she said she needed help. Samuel was in trouble. A patient had developed post-operative allergies, and he was facing possible dismissal. When I asked what I could do, she explained that Samuel worked at my husband's hospital chain, and my husband might be able to save him from severe punishment. At that point, I told her never to contact me again, that I wouldn't help, and hung up. I hadn't known Samuel worked at a different location in the same hospital chain. Checking the employee portal, I found he was on suspension. I thought about telling my husband but decided against it, not wanting to dig up the past. 2 days ago, my mother showed up at my house. It felt like seeing a ghost. I hadn't spoken to her since Jessica's engagement party. She hugged me and cried, saying how happy she was to see me after so many years, but I knew her real motive was to save Samuel. My husband was home and heard my mother begging him to help her beloved son-in-law. He explained that Samuel was under investigation for medical malpractice, and he couldn't and wouldn't do anything to help, as he refuses to abuse his position for personal gain. My mother bit her lip and left without another word. Yesterday, my husband came home and told me Samuel's investigation was complete. He would be fired, but might keep his medical license if he paid a substantial fine. He added that board members could be asked to be lenient with Samuel and possibly avoid further investigation by the state health department. Now I find myself in a dilemma. I debated whether to help Samuel forget the humiliation or let him face the consequences. As a doctor, I understood how hard it was to earn a medical license and how devastating it would be to lose it. I knew I needed to do what felt right and live with that decision. But as it turned out, I didn't need anyone's advice on what to do. Jessica and my mother's subsequent actions made it crystal clear that they were narcissists unworthy of my help. They started slandering me on social media. I rarely use Facebook, but when I checked it this week, I found Jessica had tagged me in multiple posts. She called me an evil witch and accused me of falsely reporting my husband. Jessica wrote a long post claiming I was taking revenge out of jealousy because Samuel left me to marry her. My mother joined in, saying I had cut off contact and became abusive because I couldn't accept Samuel marrying Jessica. Even relatives took their side, commenting that ruining Samuel's life was going too far for revenge. Samuel himself commented that I was delusional, claiming he had never loved me or proposed to me, and had always loved Jessica. I quickly deleted the posts and blocked everyone. I told my husband not to show any leniency towards Samuel's case, but rather to pursue maximum penalties for all violations. My husband smiled wryly, saying he'd never seen me this angry before. Samuel was officially fired from the hospital, and his case was referred to the state health department for license revocation. A new government investigation would be conducted, and if the hospital's allegations were proven true, he could lose his license and face imprisonment. It was the perfect ending. I'll keep updating on the developments. Right now, I'm enjoying the drama while eating popcorn. Note: Jessica and my mother were no longer connected to my social media. My account was previously public, allowing anyone to tag me in posts. I hadn't blocked them since I wasn't using social media 15 years ago, but now I've blocked them from both social media and my life. Update: how low can people go? I discovered Samuel had shown up at my workplace. Working at a different location in the same hospital chain, he came to my office pretending to be a patient. When I asked him to leave immediately, he insisted that since he'd paid for the consultation, I should treat him properly as a doctor. To avoid trouble, I secretly started recording on my phone while listening to his symptoms and providing treatment. He was faking cold symptoms, so I prescribed appropriate medication, but he wouldn't leave, asking unnecessary questions and trying to seduce me. When I told him to stop and leave, he started saying he'd always wanted to apologize, claiming Jessica had trapped him into having a relationship and threatened to sue him for harassment if he didn't marry her. I told him to stop this nonsense. I could have called security, but I was enjoying watching his desperation. Revenge is sweet. As I listened with a satisfied smile, he continued, "You're seeking revenge because you still love me and are hurt. Honestly, I have feelings for you too. I regret marrying Jessica. If you convince your husband to help me avoid imprisonment, I'll leave Jessica and be your lover. You don't need to leave your husband, we can have a secret relationship." This fool actually said such things, and I burst out laughing as I called security. The look of disappointment on his face when he realized he'd been recorded was priceless. He really thought he could convince me. I messaged Jessica, telling her I had a recording of her pathetic husband's behavior. When I told her, "Your loser husband came to my clinic pretending to be a patient," she replied, "I know. He tells me everything. I know you still love him. If you help him avoid losing his license and imprisonment, I'll allow you to sleep with him for one night." I was stunned. There was no point in continuing the conversation. I realized they were playing a dirty game. When I told my husband, he suggested we could report Samuel for attempted bribery, but I decided against it to avoid exposing my past. I told my husband I'd handle things one at a time and exact my own form of revenge. I added Jessica, Samuel, my mother, and relatives as friends on Facebook, and they quickly accepted. I made a lengthy post exposing their manipulation attempts, complete with screenshots of Jessica's messages and a video with still images of Samuel's recorded voice. The comments flooded in, and I blocked Jessica and the others. The relatives expressed disgust at Jessica's proposal. They tried to contact me, but I had already blocked them all. I've been reading the comments these past couple of days, and people are absolutely condemning them. It's been a perfect weekend. A few days later, an unexpected patient visited my clinic. It was Jessica's daughter, Mia. She was 15, inheriting her mother's beauty but with an introverted personality like mine. Mom doesn't know, but I want to become a doctor, she said. In that moment, I felt my past wounds beginning to heal. I saw in Mia's eyes the same sparkle of dreams I once had. Mia, I'll support your dream. But why come to me? Because you're strong. Even when people tried to crush you, you kept walking your own path. I want to be like that. From that day on, Mia and I began secretly keeping in touch. While supporting her medical dreams, I found my own heart healing bit by bit. My husband noticed the change in me. You've become so strong. You chose to look forward instead of seeking revenge. I smiled and said, we can't change the past, but we might be able to change someone's future. In the end, Samuel lost his medical license and divorced Jessica. My mother and Jessica have made several attempts to repair their relationship with Mia and me, but I maintain a quiet distance. Sometimes I see Mia in the hospital hallways. She started volunteering at my clinic after school. Watching her reminds me of my younger self. Life works in mysterious ways. The betrayal from 15 years ago has become the foundation of my strength. Through Mia, I discovered a new form of family. While blood ties might be important, what's more crucial is having relationships built on understanding and mutual support. Now I have a loving husband, children, and trusted colleagues. Most importantly, I have the courage to walk my own path. That's a happiness no one can take away from me. The day Mia was accepted to medical school, I felt secretly proud. She had become the ideal sister I had always wanted. Sometimes life's greatest pain can become its greatest gift. For me, it was discovering my own strength and understanding the true meaning of family. I no longer judge myself by anyone else's standards. This is my life, and it has become something beautiful.